Dust swirled around the weathered barn, golden rays of sunlight filtering through the gaps in the wooden slats. Wyatt stood beside a restless horse, its muscles rippling with pent-up energy. He was a man of few words, his rugged hands calloused from years of toil, eyes shadowed with unspoken stories. Across the corral, Lila watched, her dark curls catching the wind like wildflowers in a storm. She was a reflection of untamed spirit, her silence louder than the wind. With a timid smile, she approached, hands fidgeting, as if to offer a piece of herself to the furious stallion. The creature snorted, nostrils flaring, yet his gaze softened when Lila crouched beside him, whispering with a gentleness that belied her reputation. Wyatt observed, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. In that moment, amidst the dust and silence, something began to shift. A connection forged between them. Cold wind tousled Lila's hair as she stood in the dimly lit barn, her heart pounding like a drum in the oppressive silence. Shadows shifted around her, the aged wood creaking as if the building itself disapproved of what was happening. A flicker of light caught her eye, illuminating the long rows of empty stalls where horses used to roam. There was an emptiness here that was almost palpable, as if the air itself mourned a loss. She could hear muffled voices outside, men bargaining, laughter mixed with authority. The sharp edge of fear cut through her, knowing she was the product of their negotiations. Her brother's silhouette loomed at the entrance, a figure she had once trusted. But betrayal had twisted that bond into something dark and unrecognizable. "You'll be fine," he had said, his voice stony and devoid of brotherly affection. "You'll be worth something to him." Worth. The word gnawed at her. She was not an object, not a mere pawn to be sold off. But as he ushered her forward, the glint of desperation in his eyes betrayed their shared history. She was nothing but a means to his end, her fate dictated by someone else's whim. A rumble of an engine disrupted her thoughts, pulling her from the depths of despair. Lila glanced toward the barn door, dust swirling in the slanting light that streamed through. A truck appeared, large and imposing, like a predator stalking its prey. It parked abruptly, and a figure emerged, a rancher, she presumed, cutting a rugged silhouette against the vast expanse of land behind him. He stepped out slowly, as if he were wary of what lay ahead, surveying the barn with an air of authority that sent shivers down her spine. Wyatt's eyes swept across the barn with a practiced gaze, searching for something he couldn't name. He had seen countless animals in his years, each with their own spirit. But something about this place felt different. A weight of history hung in the air, heavy and thick. It didn't escape him how the young girl stood there, thrown into the role of a commodity, her eyes wide and wild. For a moment, he felt a flicker of empathy, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had come to make a deal, not to save souls. The world was filled with too many broken things, and he was no healer. When their eyes met, an unspoken recognition passed between them, a marriage of desperation and indignation. Lila stood defiantly, her chin tilted upward in a show of strength, even as her heart quaked beneath the surface. Wyatt hitched his breath, caught off guard by the fire in her gaze. He had expected docility, obedience, but she was anything but. There was a wildness in her spirit that echoed the furious stallion he had been trying to tame for months, a creature that had eluded him at every turn. Yet the moment lingered, heavy with the weight of their circumstances. He would take her, yes, but for all the wrong reasons. To him, she was just another challenge, a task to be conquered. He couldn't afford to feel too deeply, couldn't allow the fleeting spark of connection to develop into something more. The ranch had been his only companion for years. It demanded all his energy, and he was determined to keep it that way. He had no room for complications, yet here she stood, a tempest he wasn't prepared to face. The deal was struck swiftly, hastily defiling her spirit with an invisible brand that would mark her as someone else's property. As Wyatt returned to his truck, Lila felt the gravity of her loss sink into her bones. She would leave the familiar behind, but the fear of the unknown loomed larger than ever. A knot formed in her throat, choking her words, and she turned her back on the barn that had held her life thus far. With each heavy step toward the truck, she fought against the swell of tears, refusing to let them spill. After all, she wasn't broken yet. As he drove away from the ranch with her in the passenger seat, Wyatt tried to adjust to the silent presence beside him. She sat rigidly, eyes fixed on the road ahead, lost in a world of her own. The air thickened with unspoken words, the boundaries between them growing further apart. They were two souls adrift, connected by circumstance but worlds apart in their perceptions and desires. Lila could not have felt more distant, encased in a bubble of turmoil, while Wyatt remained focused on the road, oblivious yet aware of the storm brewing between them. The ranch stretched endlessly before them, a sprawling landscape that promised freedom, but felt like a cage. With the weight of trauma anchoring them both, the emotional distance only widened. Each minute spent in that truck felt eternal, a reminder that they were just beginning a journey born from desperation and necessity, a journey that might either bring them together or shatter them completely. As twilight descended upon the horizon, the sun dipped below the landscape, leaving behind a world painted in shadows and uncertainty, echoing the unresolved struggles of two lost souls. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet as Lila stepped off the dusty bus. Each footfall felt heavy as she approached the sprawling ranch, its silhouette stark against the fading light. A gust of wind whispered secrets through the grass, teasing at her frayed nerves. She could almost hear the other ranchers' laughter echoing in her mind, the stories of a wild girl arriving with a temper too fierce to be tamed. The air was thick with the scent of hay and leather, but it couldn't mask the chill that hung between her and the promise of a new beginning. Wyatt stood by the gate, his arms crossed, the lines on his face deeply etched with years of weather and wisdom. The weight of his gaze bore into her, an unyielding challenge. His steely demeanor contrasted sharply with the softness of the ranch, the horses grazing calmly nearby, unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. She felt exposed, every bit of her wild spirit laid bare as she approached. A foreign tension knotted her stomach. She sensed that here she was both an outsider and a captive. Lila. His voice was low, the syllables clipped like the cut of his boots in the dirt. It was a name, yet it felt like an ultimatum. She responded with a nod, her heart racing as she fought the urge to flee back to the bus that had brought her here. She had dreamed of escaping her past, only to find herself in a place that felt equally as confining. "Let's get you settled." He turned on his heel, leaving her little choice but to follow. They walked in silence, the ground crunching beneath their feet as the sky darkened, swallowing the last remnants of daylight. Each step felt heavier, a reminder of the shadows lingering in her heart. She sensed Wyatt's eyes darting to her occasionally, assessing her, but Lila refused to engage. Thoughts swirled in her mind, each louder than the last, questioning whether this was truly where she belonged. Inside the ranch house, the air was cool and still. The faint scent of cedar mingled with the lingering aroma of evening meals past. Wyatt gestured toward a small room, simple and bare, a single bed adorned with a patchwork quilt that seemed to passively critique her. The muted walls offered no comfort, but she knew from experience that she had to make it work, to claim this space as her own. The sound of the door closing behind her felt like a finality, sealing off the world outside. Days melded into one another, an unchanging rhythm of chores and silence. Lila learned how to care for the livestock, her hands becoming calloused but strong. Yet Wyatt remained a phantom, always just out of reach. Their exchanges were curt, practical. He never lingered long enough for warmth to develop. Instead, the quiet hovered between them like a thick fog, enveloping any potential connection. The ranch pulsed with life, but Lila felt like an intruder in its heart. Her world shifted the day she first encountered the furious Stallion, a wild-eyed beast that no one dared to approach. Wyatt had warned her to stay clear, but something deep inside called to her. The Stallion's power resonated with her own inner turbulence, and she felt an inexplicable urge to connect. She watched from a distance as Wyatt struggled with the creature, frustration radiating off him like the heat from the midday sun. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and thrill surging through her veins. "Stay back!" Wyatt's voice cut through the air, filled with authority. But Lila couldn't retreat. She felt the tension coil in her chest, urging her to step forward. Rather than retreat, she moved closer, her determination ignited by the Stallion's wild spirit. It was both reckless and bold, the very essence of who she was. As the Stallion snorted and reared, Lila took a deep breath, a daring flame igniting in her core. In that moment, Wyatt turned, astonishment flickering across his features. He had never seen someone approach the Stallion with such raw energy and conviction. The creature hesitated, sensing the boldness in Lila, and for the first time, Wyatt felt his own resolve waver. Perhaps there was a wildness within her that matched the spirit of the Stallion they both sought to understand. In the stillness that followed, the world around them faded, leaving only the possibility of connection, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, they could tame their own storms together. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a gentle glow across the ranch as Lila swung her legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her as she padded over to the window, her heart racing in anticipation of the day ahead. Wyatt's ranch was vast and unforgiving, yet it felt like a sanctuary under the sprawling sky. The wildness within her seemed to stir, excited by the rhythm of the land that whispered tales of strength and resilience. She took a deep breath, half dreading and half anticipating the first encounter with the furious Stallion. Wyatt was outside, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the awakening sun. He moved with the grace of a man who had spent a lifetime among the beasts of the land. Steely determination marked his every step as he led the Stallion to the paddock. Lila watched from the shadows, her curiosity burning. This was the man who had brought her to the ranch, who had opened his home to her when the world had felt insurmountably chaotic. Yet, beneath her admiration lay an inexplicable tension, a knot formed by the secrets they both carried. The routine emerged quickly. In the early morning, Lila would help Wyatt tend to the horses, her hands trembling as she reached out to brush the Stallion's mane. It was a tale of two hearts colliding. She attempted to connect with the beast who mirrored her own turmoil. Wyatt's watchful gaze lingered on her, a mix of pride and frustration simmering beneath the surface. He had seen many try to tame the Stallion, each ending in disaster. But Lila, with her wild spirit, seemed determined to forge a different path. "Why do you keep coming back to him?" Wyatt asked one afternoon, his eyes narrowing as he observed her patience. Lila straightened, rolling her shoulders back, the weight of his question pressing against her. It felt as though he was not just speaking of the Stallion, he was asking about her too. "Maybe because I understand what it feels like to be wild and untamed," she responded defiantly, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Maybe because I want to show that I can." Wyatt's expression hardened for a moment, and she regretted her words, sensing the fracture they created between them. He had extended his hand to her when she was at her lowest, but now, as she pressed against the wall of his boundaries, she felt the distance grow. He turned away, focusing on the Stallion, the muscles of his back tense with unspilled frustrations. Lila watched him, the sense of connection they shared feeling fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. As the days passed, Lila found herself falling into a rhythm. She would wake, tend to the horses, and often sneak glances at Wyatt as he worked. The more she observed him, the more layers she unveiled. There was a warmth beneath his rugged exterior, a softness that emerged when he didn't think she was watching. It made her heart ache with longing, but every time she pushed for a deeper connection, the walls he had built would rise again, reminding her of the boundaries he insisted on maintaining. One evening, under the stretch of a bruised sky, Lila approached Wyatt as he was brushing down the stallion. "You don't have to be so tough all the time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a vulnerability in her tone, one that made him halt in his movements. "This doesn't have to be a battle," she continued, stepping closer. "You can let me in, Wyatt." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions, but he remained silent, the turbulent storm behind his eyes revealing the struggle within. The stallion shifted restlessly, sensing the tension between them. Lila reached out, her fingers brushing against the prickly fur of the beast, grounding herself in the moment. Suddenly, Wyatt turned, his face close to hers, and she saw the flicker of raw emotion in his gaze, a mixture of fear and hope. For a heartbeat, the world around them faded, and there was only the electricity of shared understanding. But just like that, he pulled back, retreating behind his walls once more, leaving Lila feeling vulnerable and exposed. As the days turned into weeks, annoyance and frustration swirled within her. Why was he unable to see the strength in vulnerability? But perhaps deep down, she knew that she too clung to her wildness, refusing to let anyone close enough to truly see her. Yet with every attempt to tame the stallion, she felt a connection grow, with both the creature and the man watching over her. And within that bond lay the possibility of healing for them both, even if neither was ready to admit it yet. Wyatt stood at the edge of the pasture, the early morning sun casting a golden hue over the fields. The ground was still damp with dew, and the air smelled of fresh earth and hay. He watched Lila as she moved among the horses, her laughter weaving through the air like a sweet melody, a stark contrast to the turbulent thoughts swirling in his mind. He remembered the first time he had seen her, wild and defiant, refusing to follow anyone's rules. But now, there was a softness to her that he couldn't ignore, a lightness that made the burden of his old wounds weigh a little less. Lila had come into his life like a storm, each day more unpredictable than the last. As she bent down to brush the dirt off the flank of a chestnut mare, her movements were fluid, instinctual. She had transformed in ways he never expected. Yet, behind her laughter, he sensed a flicker of despair, a shadow lingering just beyond her bright smile. It gnawed at him, making him question whether he understood her at all. He wanted to reach out, to pierce the walls she had built, but the fear of pushing too hard, of triggering her defensiveness, often kept his lips sealed. Later that afternoon, as the sky took on hues of orange and pink, Wyatt found Lila sitting on a wooden fence, her feet dangling just above the ground. She stared out at the horizon, her expression distant, as if she were miles away in thoughts that he couldn't touch. He approached slowly, mindful of her fragile state. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if the wind could carry his concern away. She turned to him, a flicker of surprise in her bright eyes, but it was swallowed by something deeper, a shadow that danced just beneath the surface. "I'm fine," she replied too quickly, her tone clipped. But he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with the frayed hem of her shirt. It wasn't the first time she had brushed him off, and he felt a heaviness settle in his chest. "Lila," he said, stepping closer, "you don't have to pretend with me. You can talk to me." Her gaze dropped to the ground, the weight of unshed tears evident in her silence. She bit her lip, the fight in her blazing eyes wavering against a backdrop of vulnerability. The quiet stretched between them, thick and suffocating, and he wrestled with the urge to break it, to press on. "I know what it's like to carry a heavy heart," he said, the words spilling out more gently than he intended. "You don't have to face everything alone." That made her look up, and for a brief moment he saw the wild spirit he had fallen for, flashing through the veneer of hurt. "It's not that simple, Wyatt," she said, her voice wavering. "You don't understand. You may have your demons, but I'm the one who's too wild to raise. My past isn't something I can just shake off." His heart sank, the truth of her words hitting him harder than he anticipated. She was right. He didn't know the full extent of her struggles, the moments that shaped her into the girl sitting before him now. As he shifted uncomfortably, he realized he had only seen a fragment of the battle she had fought. "I'm not trying to judge you," he said, the frustration bubbling beneath his skin. "I just want to help." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound, devoid of warmth. Help or save? There's a difference, you know. In that moment, her fragility felt like a mirror, reflecting the turmoil he had buried for too long. He opened his mouth to respond, but stopped when he saw the pain shimmering in her eyes. He was not a savior. He was simply a man who had lost himself among his own nightmares. And here they were, both clinging to the past while standing on the precipice of something new. "I'm just trying to understand you, Lila," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I care about you, and I don't want to lose you." Wyatt watched as she wrestled with her emotions, the flicker of vulnerability burgeoning into something raw. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't want you to see me like this." He stepped closer, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. "You could never be a burden. I want to know all of you, the wild parts and the vulnerable ones." For the first time, their eyes locked, and he saw the truth glisten there, the desire to be seen, to be understood, to be loved, not despite her wildness, but because of it. The sun dipped low, its golden rays pouring over the vast fields of the ranch, casting a warm glow that also suggested a sense of coming night. Lila leaned against the fence, her fingers tracing the weathered wood where the sun had left splinters of light dancing on the surface. Her heart was still pounding from the earlier encounter with the furious Stallion, a beauty so wild it had taken her breath away. As she watched the animal gallop in the distance, Lila imagined the freedom in each stride, a longing echoing inside her for the untamed spirit she had reckoned with earlier. Wyatt emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his worn jeans, a frown etched on his rugged face. He had seen Lila's determination and bravery, but shadows of doubt lingered in his mind. He wanted to believe that the girl could conquer the wildness of the Stallion, but he had also seen what that sort of chaos could do to a person. As his eyes found her, he softened a little, the light of the setting sun brushing across his features, illuminating the lines of worry that had formed in his brow. "Shouldn't you be inside, Lila? It's getting dark," he called out, his voice gruff, yet tinted with a subtle concern. Lila turned, the glow of the sunset gracing her face, revealing a spark of mischief that made her eyes twinkle like the stars soon to appear. She was a wild card, an uncontained force, and Wyatt couldn't help but be drawn to her fierce spirit. "I could say the same for you," she replied, her tone playful. "You want to watch the sunset with me? Or are you too busy being the big, grumpy rancher?" There was a teasing lilt in her voice, and Wyatt felt an unexpected warmth envelop his chest. The connection between them was palpable, a tether that pulled tighter with each shared glance. He wasn't sure whether to scold her or laugh. Perhaps both options were equally ridiculous. Wyatt approached, leaning against the same fence, the space between them bridged by the setting sun and their breathing. "I reckon I have a little time to spare," he conceded, a hint of a smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. The moment hung between them, like the golden light bathing the land, unfurling a sense of normalcy they've both been craving. They stood side by side, their gazes fixed on the horizon, but an unspoken understanding blossomed amidst the silence, weaving its way into the fabric of their hearts. The last slivers of sunlight danced away, and darkness settled, yet Lila felt illuminated by the presence of Wyatt beside her. She caught a fleeting glance sideways, noticing the way the dusk painted his rugged features in shadows and soft light, making him appear almost heroic. She was captivated by the man whose hands bore the calluses of hard work, a life spent nurturing the land and its creatures. There was something tender beneath the surface of his strength, a depth she longed to explore. In a moment of courage, Lila reached out, her fingers brushing against Wyatt's arm, a light touch that sent ripples of surprise through them both. "Do you think I can really tame that stallion?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a genuine question, but it felt heavier than just the wild horse. It was intertwined with her own fears and dreams. She needed to know if he believed in her, if he could see beyond the wild exterior she often wore as armor. Wyatt turned to her, his gaze probing, as if he could see the layers she kept hidden beneath her bravado. "I think you've got fire in you, Lila," he said, his voice steady. "But it's not just about taming a stallion. It's about working together, understanding each other." His words hung thick in the air, filled with implication, as they both recognized the intertwining of their fates. The moment felt electric, their hearts thudding in sync. Wyatt's intense eyes softened, and Lila felt a flutter of hope bloom in her chest for the first time in years. She nodded slowly, sealing their silent pact. They would face the storm together, her wild spirit and his steadfast resolve entwined like the threads of a tapestry, beautifully chaotic yet undeniably connected. Lila stood near the corral, the fading sun draping the ranch in hues of orange and gold. The world outside her heart felt vibrant, yet she stood at the edge of it, a shadow hiding from the light. Wyatt had been trying to coax her out of her silence, but each attempt felt like another push against the brick wall she had built around herself. She could hear the wild stallion neighing in the distance, the sound echoing in her chest, a call she resonated with. She took a deep breath, tasting the earthy air that mingled with the scent of hay and leather. It filled her lungs, but still her voice remained trapped inside, stifled by fear. Every morning, as Wyatt saddled a horse, he would turn to her and smile, that genuine, welcoming smile that sparked something deep within her. She wanted to smile back, to respond, to reveal the thoughts swirling inside her mind like a tempest. But each time she opened her mouth, it felt as though the words were strangled by the weight of her insecurities. In moments when their eyes locked, she saw in Wyatt's gaze an invitation, an urge for connection. But Lila stood frozen, navigating the tumult of her emotions, worried that what she had to say wouldn't matter, that her voice would simply mirror the chaos of the stallion's wild spirit. The stallion was a mirror of her own inner battle. Furious, untamed, he had bucked and kicked every time Wyatt had tried to approach him. Lila had watched in awe as Wyatt, with fierce determination, had sought to tame the beast. It was then that she realized they were not so different. Both needed to be understood. Both needed to find trust amid their fear. Lila clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms as the vision of the stallion's wild eyes flashed in her mind. If only she could find that courage for herself. If she could bare her soul like Wyatt did for the horse, then perhaps she could finally break the silence that bound her. One afternoon, after a particularly tense standoff between Wyatt and the stallion, he had turned to her, weary yet steadfast. "You know," he said, his voice low but firm, "trust takes time, just like taming a wild horse." In that moment, Lila felt as though he saw through her facade, as if he had plucked the veil that cloaked her heart. Trust. The word echoed in her mind like a mantra, but it did little to quell the storm inside her. She wanted nothing more than to leap from the shadows, to claim her place at his side, but the chains of her silence held her captive. Days passed, and the ranch continued its rhythm around her. Yet, Lila was acutely aware of the growing distance between her and Wyatt. Each attempt at communication felt like a chasm too wide to bridge. She watched him work with the stallion, his hands steady, his voice soothing, creating a bond that Lila yearned for. It was a gradual process of trust, and with each small victory, she felt a pang of envy mixed with admiration. Part of her marveled at the way he understood that wild beast, while the other part criticized her for not finding the same patience with herself. Then came a night under the vast blanket of stars when she found herself out by the corral. The moon cast a silvery sheen over the landscape, illuminating the path to the stallion. She felt drawn to him, the power of his presence both exhilarating and terrifying. Lila hesitated, her heart racing as she approached the fence. The stallion looked at her, his breath steaming in the cool night air, and for the first time she truly saw him, not just a furious creature, but a being longing for understanding. As she reached out her trembling hand, her pulse quickened, and her mind screamed for her to step back. But this moment was different. It was the catalyst for something deep within her. With a deep breath, she whispered softly, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The words came out barely audible, a breath of sound lost in the stillness, but it was the first step. The stallion took a slow step forward, as if recognizing the sincerity of her voice. Lila's chest tightened with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had spoken. She had crossed that invisible boundary. Encouraged by the stallion's response, she took another deep breath, feeling the weight of her silence begin to lift. "You just want to be trusted like me," she said, her voice trembling yet stronger than before. And there, under the stars, Lila realized something profound. The wildness in her didn't need to be tamed. It needed to be expressed. It was the very essence of who she was, just like the stallion. In that moment, a flicker of belief ignited within her. If a furious creature could learn to trust, then so could she. She raised her voice again, louder this time, confident yet soft, and called out to the stallion, "We can do this together, I promise." The night air was thick with possibility, and as she spoke, she felt Wyatt's watchful gaze on her, an anchor pulling her back toward the light. The sun hung low on the horizon, streaking the sky in shades of amber and violet, as Lila stood at the edge of the corral. The air was thick with the scent of hay and the earthy tang of horse sweat. Yet something deeper lingered, an unspoken tension that shivered between her and Wyatt. She watched him work with the stallion, a titan of muscle and fury, as he attempted to coax trust from the beast that had sworn to resist. The raw energy of the animal mirrored the whirlwind of emotions within her, fear, hope, and a longing she couldn't quite name. Wyatt moved with not just strength but an undeniable grace, his body attuned to the rhythm of the stallion's powerful strides. Lila leaned against the wooden railing, memories flooding her mind, snapping twigs, the weight of silence, and the soft brush of his hand on her cheek when he had first taken her under his wing. He had seen something wild in her that others failed to understand, a spirit so unbroken it terrified her. Yet she had become stronger under his watchful eye, just as he had tried to tame the furious stallion, both of them battling their own storms. As the sun dipped lower, the stallion bucked and kicked, unyielding and untamed. Wyatt was persistent, his voice low and soothing, working through the tension. Lila felt a pang of empathy for both, the man who fought for control and the animal that had been wronged. She could feel the energy radiating between them, a fragile bond forged in trust and desperation. She wanted to shout, to dive in and help Wyatt, but a part of her was rooted to the spot, carving her own path of understanding, much like the stallion's. The world around them faded as the moment stretched, and Lila took a tentative step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could almost hear the rhythm of the horse's breathing aligning with the furious beats of her own heart. It was a dance of souls, and as Wyatt whispered soothingly, she knew what she had to do. The stallion paused, sensing her approach, its fierce eyes locking onto hers. In that moment, their gazes intertwined, and something inside her broke loose. "Wyatt!" she breathed, a name that had become sacred in her every waking thought. It sprang from her lips, unbidden and powerful, echoing through the corral like the crack of a whip. The moment hung suspended as Wyatt glanced back, surprise flickering across his rugged features. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and the air between them thickened, as if the very fabric of their shared struggle wove something new, an understanding, a promise wrapped in hope. "Lila," he responded, the weight of her name carrying deep significance in his voice. It was a conversation filled with unspoken truths, each syllable laden with the experiences that bound them. The stallion seemed to sense the shift, its fierce demeanor lessening, trading anger for curiosity. Lila took another step forward, emboldened by the connection that ignited between them, the resonance of their journey crackling in the twilight. In that charged moment, Lila held her breath, willing herself to cross the threshold of everything unspoken. "Wyatt!" she repeated, firmer this time, each vowel like a tether binding them closer. "You've shown me strength when I felt fragile. Just as you're taming that stallion, you've tamed the wildness inside me." She stepped closer still, her heart racing. "I'm not just a girl too wild to raise. I'm Lila, and I stand with you." Wyatt's expression softened, the harsh lines of a man who had fought a lifetime beginning to soften. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging not just her words, but the depth of their shared battles and triumphs. The stallion sidestepped, releasing a deep breath as if it too understood the shifting dynamics. In that moment, the wildness of both their spirits settled, surrendering to something greater than themselves, the first threads of trust woven into the tapestry of their lives. With the last rays of the sun slipping beneath the horizon, Lila stepped into Wyatt's space, heart laid bare and courage ignited. As the stars began to twinkle above, she reached out, her hand brushing against the strong lines of his arm. The stallion shifted closer, its fierce spirit tempered by the warmth of their bond. In the soft stillness of the ranch, a new chapter began. The wildness within both man and girl, no longer a force to be tamed, but a bond to be cherished. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in strokes of gold and crimson, as Lila stood by the fence, fingers tracing the worn wood. The stallion grazed nearby, its powerful form silhouetted against the fading light. Wyatt approached, his heart echoing the quiet pulse of the ranch, a rhythm they had learned to trust. Lila turned, her hair catching the last rays, cascading like wild grasses in the summer breeze. She held something in her palm, a small, delicate feather, the remnants of a once furious flight. Wyatt reached for it, their fingers brushing, and in that fleeting touch, all the chaos of their past melted away. The stallion lifted its head, nostrils flaring, sensing the bond that had formed between them. Wyatt stepped closer, the silence stretching, heavy yet light, cradling their unspoken understanding. Lila leaned into him, her warmth grounding the weight of the world. Together, they watched the stallion, now calm and steady, a reflection of their own hearts. As the vibrant colors of the sky faded into twilight, they stood side by side, the quiet promise of tomorrow wrapping around them like the soft embrace of night. In that moment, they were home,